Yeah, thanks for joining us. I'm going to talk kind of at a pretty high level overview of just defensive systems and probably more so on the scouting side. Certainly on the scouting report, like how we communicate what our defensive plan is for a match to our athletes. So I won't go, I'm certainly not going to go into the specifics of what we do, just to, I don't think anybody's going to tell anybody, any of our competitors anything, but of course, you want to be, can't be too careful. And so just to, kind of preface that, like, I'm not going to go specific into like, what is it that the men's national team does specifically now. In terms of a defensive system. But like I said, the main thing that I want to show is just how we've evolved, kind of how we've approached defensive systems. Really, the turning point was after the Tokyo Olympics, when our head coach, John Sprock, hired assistant coach Javier Weber, who, if you don't know who Coach Javier Weber is, I mean, just give him a quick Google. The man is an absolute legend. He's played for Argentina, for the Argentinian national team, in 3 different Olympics, as an extensive playing and coaching resume, coaches in Poland right now. And he's been an absolute blast to work with. And we'll talk a little bit, again, kind of high level overview of how bringing Coach Javier Weber into our staff has, helped us evolve our defensive systems. And so so just to kind of get started of where we were coming from. So certainly from when I joined the national team through the Tokyo Olympics, what our defensive system looked like. It's just very highly individualized, and so it required that our athletes know what they were doing, so what their specific assignments were against certain hitters in specific situations, and it was a lot. And so I'm going to show a couple versions of our scouting report, so you guys can kind of see. Hopefully. Are you guys seeing the scouting?
Yep, that's coming through
Perfect.
clear on my end.
Yeah. So this is an example from our Olympic qualifying tournament 4 years ago in Netherlands when we were playing against South Korea. And so, that what this is trying to show is, for each attacker, here's a couple of their outside hitters here. Here's a couple of their middles and their opposite. And using some visualization and trying to show our 3 back row defenders where we would want them to stand based on the attack data that we had from them, right? So, and here we have kind of a visual representation of when they're hitting balls from the left side in system, out of system, when they're hitting from the right side, when they're hitting the big in system back row, and where we want our defenders standing in each of these situations, right? And so the letter in the circle here, so S would stand for sharp. Here we're saying that we want our area 6 defender or middle back defender to step left, so SL. N is neutral, so this is kind of our base spot against left side attack. Same thing here. Here now on the other side, when this outside hitter is sitting on the right, we're telling our area 6 defender, middle back defender to step right here, SR. And then here against the BIC, we saw that this player is not hitting a whole lot of balls, kind of on the sideline. And so we want our wing defenders to kind of bunch in, right? So you can see in there. And so this is what, a scouting report would look like. One other kind of format that we also gave our athletes at this time was this defensive plan sheet. And so the idea of this was, instead of looking at, okay, opponent by opponent on their side, what I wanted to do is flip the perspective. And so this is saying, hey, if you are the area 2 or the right front blocker, these are the things that you are going to be responsible for, right? So now, instead of all the hitters, and now I got to go find what I'm doing by each of their hitters, now I just go, if I'm a setter or a right side or an opposite, I can come into this box and look at, okay, here are the outsides that I need to know and what I'm going to do. What am I doing? Am I helping on the middle? What am I doing if they set the other way and I'm the off blocker? And then what happens in rotation 1 when their opposite is lined up against me on their left side, on my right side? And so the idea here being, okay, there's a lot of assignments here that I have to go dig out and figure out what I got to go do, right? A lot of opponents, a lot of situations. Can I flip that perspective and make it easier for my players on my side defensively to know, okay, here's all the pertinent information that I need to know if I'm the right side blocker or the left side blocker, or if I'm the middle blocker, or the area 1 defender, area 6 defender, area 5 defender, and so on. So that's what it looked like for us. And, I think the idea that I'm trying to get across here is that, yeah, it's a lot of information, and even for our athletes a lot of our athletes who've played with or against a lot of the players that we will play against with the national team, they're pretty familiar with it. And so maybe some of that is, hopefully second nature, but it's still a lot of information for our athletes to have to kind of remember. And so, certainly, we've had a good amount of success. Coach Spraz had a good amount of success since the 2016 quad when he became the head coach in 2013 using this system up through the Tokyo Olympics. After the Tokyo Olympics, as I do kind of year after each summer, after each season for us, looking at our, just kind of overall summary of, how we did statistically. I think one of the things that we saw was that, hey, we depend on our serve a lot to get teams out of system and then be able to defend them in that way and then score points in that situation. And we were maybe not as good as some other teams per se defending in-system balls and in-system situations. And so after Tokyo, Coach Bra went and reached out to Coach Weber and asked him to join our staff. And fortunately for us, he accepted. And now when Coach Weber came into our staff, he brought this. He worked with us to integrate a defensive system where instead of it being so individualized, it's a little bit more collaborative between the block and the defense. And because now that we have this defensive system that's more collaborative between block and defense, it made things a lot simpler, right? Especially for our athletes, where it's like, instead of having to memorize all the things, right? Like we saw in those last couple examples of the scouting report. Now it's a lot more us focused, and it makes things, certainly, hopefully on the athletes end, there's less things to remember in general. But then also from a team perspective, instead of being so hyper focused on, okay, hey, it's this hitter and he does this, and it's that hitter and he does that, Now it's a little bit more of just, hey, here's what we're doing, on our side, and we just got to make sure that we're doing, what we need to do in terms of our system, where we know what our block is doing, and so our defense is, in the back rows is doing what their job is relative to what the block is doing. And in terms of how that's changed, certainly from my role in terms of like the scouting report and the communication of it all, our scouting reports have now become so much simpler, right? And because now instead of having to like memorize a ton of things to like account for all these situations, a lot of the situations are accounted for within our system where block and defense is playing together. But not to say that we can't, we can still make adjustments to hit, to whatever we scout in terms of our opponents, right? And so this, for example, is the format that we use now for our scouting reports, because we don't have so much information player by player that we need to give. The idea here is now it's, hey, what are the main keys that we want to focus on for this match? And then what are we going to actually do about it, right? I think one of the things that throughout my time working with teams and our scouting reports, I think there's usually no shortage of good information on a scouting report about what the other team likes to do. And I really wanted to, when I came up with this format, was I really wanted to just highlight, hey, okay, here are the things that we're talking about this team likes to do, but what is it that we're actually going to do about it? I think sometimes that gets lost. The action plan of it, the what are we going to do about it piece of it, tends to get lost in all the information that is available that we watch a video, and especially us as coaches, we kind of, that's like where we have some control over. We can study, the other team as much as we can. And so we want to show that we've done that and give all this information. But sometimes we don't necessarily get to the point of like, hey, this is, what are we actually going to go do about it, right? And so this is the scouting report that we had against Costa Rica with, as Jordan had mentioned, when we were down in Guatemala with the U19 boys. And so you can see it's just a lot more concise in terms of the information that we're giving, right? Especially, we're going, our assistant coach with the national team, Matt Furbringer, served as the head coach in Guatemala for this trip. And so, and Coach Furbringer, he's the one who's doing all the defensive plans for us with the national team. And so he wanted to also make sure that, hey, with these U19 boys, like, we had 1 week of training with them, and then we went straight down into competition. And so it's not like we can expect, 17, 18-year-old boys to memorize a million different things of, what does this guy do for Costa Rica? What does that guy do? And then not to mention, we also didn't have so much data on our opponents down there as well. And so, I think in terms of communicating what our game plan is, this format really, I've really liked being able to work in this format because it's just very clear of like, hey, here are the things, and for the most part in order of what are the priorities that we feel like defensively are going to be important for this match. And then here's what we're actually going to do about it to be able to slow down number 19, slow down number 15, and so on. And then in terms of the block and defense itself, like when we're in the match, our coaches, we have different kind of formations. It's almost like plays, you can say, where our coaches are calling in plays based on the information that we are scouting and scouting the other team for. And so one of the important things that we do, if my mouse will stop hiding from me, is studying setter distribution. This is this is kind of a pre-generated report that we have where we really break down, hey, what does the setter like to do? Here, for example, this is a Costa Rica setter over the course of, I think, 3 matches worth of information here. What is it in each rotation that they like to do? So here, for example, this is the rotation 1. Each of these points or these coordinates are where the setter is setting the ball from. The color represents who he set it to. So if it's green, he set the left side. If it's red, he set the right side. If it's yellow, he set the middle. And if it's purple, he set the back row outside. And we break it up into when the middle is a viable option and when the middle is not a viable option based on how I'm tagging that information. And so we go through and, this is, again, like, this is where we, as coaches, we kind of study like, oh, okay, well, here, clearly there's no yellow dots. Their quick distribution percentage is 0 here in this rotation. And so, we'll have a play for, hey, we're not going to worry about the middle in this situation here. And for the most part, the middle wasn't a big factor for this team. And so as we saw in here, right, there are 2 outside hitters, or their outside hitter and their opposite were their 2 big hitters. And they were the ones that we really wanted to pay attention to. And so, this is just kind of one of the tools that we use in terms of, being able to break down information. So by rotation, by setter, and then here is like, based on when number 19 is the outside hitter with a certain setter, this is what they like to do, how they like to play together, and what the distribution is, and so on and so forth. So, so we use these tools, and and so that kind of helps inform our coaches to call, whatever play that they want to call in. That's what they that's kind of that information that we're using. And then just as far as, we fortunately we're able to record our matches, and we go and study it afterwards. Instead of having to, from a coach's perspective, instead of like, oh, against this player, we were left foot in the corner, right foot in the corner, step left, step right. Instead of having to, even for us to memorize, like, hey, these are the things that we wanted to do. Now it's a lot more us centric, and so we know, like, hey, in this play, this is what we're trying to accomplish. And so when we're watching that back on video, it's like, okay, like, are we doing the things that we needed to do on our end? And again, it become we bring the focus back to our side, which I think has been really really beneficial for us, as opposed to like kind of almost like chasing the other team in terms of like, hey, it's that player, we got to do that. It's that player, we got to do that. And so just in terms of the evolution of our defensive systems, that's kind of where the big change that we've had over the last year now, and we're excited to go into year 2 of this, with Coach Javier Weber and with Coach Furbringer running this. And even after last year, going through and doing my statistical review of our summer, we saw a lot more sets in which we didn't, we weren't getting our opponents in as much trouble from a serving perspective, but we were still scoring points on serve, of course, due to more so to our defense. We saw a big jump in that last year, as compared to years previous, where we were, a little bit more all in on, hey, we've got to just serve tough and get our opponents in trouble. And so, yeah, and just as you can kind of see with just even the change of the format of the scouting report, just the communication of that game plan has become far simpler. and just more, and just again, being able to assess our effectiveness within it when we're going through that with the team has become a lot more efficient as well. So that's kind of what I had to share. So I think Jordan, I'm not sure where you want to go from there after that Q&A.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for walking us through that process. That's really great to kind of get an inside look. I do have a few questions that have been submitted ahead of time. And coaches, if you're joining us live tonight, if you want to ask your questions live directly tonight, feel free to just raise your hand or drop it in the Q&A and we can get his thoughts. So one of the first questions that I have here is, if you know of or recommend any scalable approaches to scouting that coaches can take if they're a solo coach or working in a program that might not have many resources. In my mind, I would think maybe that's for like data volley or using any other type of tool.
Yeah. I think as far as in terms of like gathering information, gathering data, there's actually I was made aware of a tool. It's called Shot Plotter. It's an open source tool that you can either if you're trying to chart attackers or chart setters. I think it's actually a really neat tool. Like it's you can use it on different sports, and volleyball was added as one of them fairly recently. And the person who created it, I met her at the USOPC Data Summit last fall, and so she's doing really great work, and it's a really cool tool. And I think for me, if I was solo coaching a team like a club team or something like that, and if there was one thing that I could, scout, I would say I would want to probably understand setter distribution first and foremost. I think that is something that that you can kind of hone in on and be able to understand, like, hey, they don't like to set this person in this situation, or they really want to set this person in this situation. And so you can, at least from a coach's perspective, that's for the, you probably have the most control in terms of like what kind of defensive scheme that you're going to run. And then the rest is like, can you train your team to play good defense right behind that? And so I think, in terms of what you can get a lot of data on in like once in one match, I don't think, hitting, like, I think hitting takes a lot of matches to be able to really, like, in terms of a data, to really get a really clear pattern of like, hey, this hitter really wants to do this or that. But I think setter distribution and being able to kind of see what is it that they're trying to do, how do they want to play with certain players, I think that's probably the piece that I would try to scout if I was on my own.
Great. No, that's really helpful. And that's the first I've heard of Shot Plotter and some of those other ideas. So I think that's awesome. And Coach Harry submitted a question here. He says, have you ever seen an offensive plan that was just flawless to where you could not have a good defensive plan or answer? Or do you find that all offensive systems and strategies do have weaknesses that you can exploit?
Oh, that's a good. Can you repeat that question again?
Yeah, absolutely. So have you ever seen an offensive plan that was flawless to where you couldn't find an answer in your defensive plan? Or do you find that every offensive system or strategy has a weakness somewhere that you can exploit?
Yeah, that's I don't know if I think at our level, I think it's pretty rare. Certainly when you get top teams playing against top teams, I think it's pretty rare that you find, certainly over the course of an entire match, that you'll see like, oh man, like there was just no stopping this team on offense. And if there is, like, usually it's more of a mismatch from a physical, from a physical standpoint. Like this, yeah, there's just one player who's just, you know, yeah, or maybe there's a matchup where, you have your best outside hitter against a tiny setter or something like that, and they just can't stop them. Um, I don't know that I've seen, I don't know that I've seen any team like, certainly from our perspective, that's just absolutely outwit us from the offensive perspective, where we didn't have any way to like counteract that defensively. Um, so hopefully that, I think that the general answer is I don't think I've seen that. And then the more nuanced answer, I guess, is yeah, maybe if there's like some kind of mismatch that, happens over the course of a set, maybe a team will run away with it a little bit. But otherwise, yeah, I don't know that I've seen that per se.
Oh yeah, I think that's a great question too from Coach Harry. And appreciate you giving your insights on that, Nate. This next one I think is a great one, and you touch base on it a little bit. So it says, what strategies do you use to make sure that the scouting information sticks with athletes? And I know you mentioned kind of reducing the length of the information you give, like keeping it simple. So maybe some other strategies, like what does the environment kind of look like? Like what kind of room or location do you choose when providing the scouting, or anything else that comes to mind?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know that we've thought too much about environment. I think that's generally pretty limited for us. It's either, I think we're doing most of our scouting in a hotel meeting room. So I don't know that we have a whole lot of choice as far as that goes. I think there's some from teams that I've been with in the past. Like I think doing walkthroughs on the court, I think, can be a pretty effective way to go through like, hey, these are the main things that we're trying to do, and get them on the court and like moving around and actually putting the athletes in the places that we want them to be. And then like, you know, with teams that I've been with, we've done like the starting six on one side on defense, and then we get six players who are not on the starting side, kind of acting as players from the scouting report. And so, even as far as like putting like pennies on them with their numbers, to be able to visually see like, oh, okay, outside number 6 over there, when she's in the front row, this is what we're doing against her. So I think that's probably a good effective way to kind of break out of maybe just like the, kind of classroom or hotel room setting. As far as like the actual like content of the scouting report itself, I mean, one of the things that I've been really trying to do, as you saw like with the old scouting report from the Korea match, is make things more visual. And instead of just a lot of like text, just trying to make things like, okay, like here's a court, here's where, attacks are being hit. And I'll pull this back up again just to make the point, right? It's like I can tell you like, hey, against this, against the go against number 10, we want you to be sharp here for these balls. So we can say that in text, or I can show you like, hey, here's the information, here's the data points. Like you can see the darker it is, the more balls that go there. So that you can kind of see like, hey, this is where we want you to stand. This is why we want you to stand there. And so there's just a little bit more, just understanding of, instead of just like, hey, we're telling you, this is what we want you to do, and because we're the coach and that's it, right? Um, so
No, that's great. And thanks for pulling back up that visual there for the explanation. This next question says, statistically, What metrics do you look at or measure to gauge how successful your defense is performing?
All right. This might get a little I don't know, theoretical, philosophical, I guess.
Yeah,
So uh I think pretty much in any sport, I think one of the more difficult things is to measure defense, right? I think it's hard because like even for volleyball, right? It's like you can be a good blocker, but maybe you're not touching a ton of balls. But like, how do you know, like how do you know that that person's a good blocker or whatever you were trying to measure? This might start going down a little bit of the rabbit hole. So defensively, I think many coaches have probably heard of like dig percentage, convert percentage, create percentage. I'm not crazy about those metrics, and because for me, what that is trying to say is like, hey, when I dig the ball, where am I digging the ball to? Which is sure, like there's some merit in that. For me, what I'm wanting to understand is how difficult of an attack from the opponent am I trying to dig? I think for me, that's the more important question. And so one of the things that again, this is going to kind of go to a kind of a deeper level, which is when I'm looking at a certain player's dig attempts, what I do is I look at what is the situation that the hitter that is attacking the ball before the dig attempt, what situation is that hitter hitting the ball in from? And I'm, kind of using like, we use something called expected kill. So when, depending on like, if it's a perfect pass, right? If the ball's up at the net, just right of center, and it's a perfect pass, there's a middle involved, then based on that, I have a model on my back end that tells me, hey, based on where that setter's setting the ball from, that attacker should be tilling the ball with a probability of, let's call it 60%, right? And so if that hitter is hitting that ball from that situation where they're expecting to kill that ball at 60%, and I dig it, then I want to know like how, like that difference, right? Like they were expected to kill the ball at 60%, which is high, but I was able to stop that ball from being killed. So that is going to be worth more than, let's say, a ball that's coming from way off the court in area 1, right? Where that expected kill is probably, let's say mid 20, like 25%.
yeah,
And so that dig where you're digging that ball from a perfect pass where you expect that ball to be killed at 60% is going to be worth more than that ball that I'm digging from, an expected kill of 25%. So I look at this thing, I call it like expected kill difference. And so over the course of a number of attempts, like, okay, what is the percentage of balls that am I digging? But also, how much was my opponent expected to kill over the course of those attempts? And then how much did they actually kill when I had a dig attempt assigned to me? And so the difference there, hopefully the number is more negative, right? Because now they're killing the ball less than they should have based on my model. So a little theoretical, but that's kind of the metric that we're looking at in terms of defense.
Yeah, I mean, logically, and that's really awesome to hear you talk about and expand on. So thanks for sharing that. I mean, logically, it makes sense that that's something you could take a look at. But to your point, it is, I guess, philosophical or how you feel, it could be measured. It can change depending on, what your take is. But yeah, I think that sounds pretty sound to me. So
Yeah.
no, thanks so much for, digging into that one. So our next question comes from Coach Kyle. So he's asking, do you think it would be too much to have a club level or like a high school level team learn more than one defensive system at the same time? Example would be like perimeter, rotational, middle, etc. Or do you think that you should just try and master one per season, or try and really drill one per season?
Yeah, I think, I don't know that it's too much to have to be, even let's use the example of perimeter versus rotation. Like there are merits to being able to use both, right? And I think there's times where it's like, oh man, like it would be probably pretty good to use the defensive or rotational defense against this outside hitter who is not hitting a whole lot of cross, who's tipping a lot of balls and wants to hit line, right? And and so why not have the ability to go in and out of perimeter versus rotation based on, maybe based on what over the course of a match, like, hey, we're getting beat on down the line or whatever it is, or we keep getting beat on that short tip. Let's go out instead of being in perimeter. Let's go into a rotation defense and let's go. That's a tactic that you can use as a coach, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's the players that are playing the game, but what can you do as a coach is you can put them hopefully in situations where they're hopefully in a place to succeed. And so, yeah, I'd say I I I don't I'd like to think that we, certainly at like the 16s, 17s, 18s level, like I don't know that that's too much to ask to be able to say, hey, we can, our standard defense is a perimeter, but we have this option of like this is what a rotation defense is. And maybe every now and again we can say, hey, we're going to be in a rotation defense on this play. Yeah, I think that's hopefully doable. I'll be the first to admit my club coaching experience uh, has been a few years of 12 and under and 11 and unders. So I haven't coached a whole lot of 14s through 18s per se. So I don't want to speak totally out of line. But I feel like even just exposing athletes to that idea, like, hey, we can shift in and out of different defensive schemes, I think is not a terrible, I think that's a good thing to be exposed to.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question too. And that's where, like to Nate's point too, I think for coaches who are actively, in that club scene, it would be really interesting to just hear like what number of, defensive plans or plays you find like works best or that like athletes or teams can handle throughout a season. Honestly, could be like a really, really cool discussion board topic too. So I might take a look at posting that for coaches to just talk about after this session as well. Um, this next one here, because there was another question that I think was of a similar, um, topic there was just how many plays would you recommend preparing for defense in a match, or a point where you feel there would be too many, but I feel like you gave some good information there, with Coach Kyle's question. So we got one more question. I'll keep an eye out as you kind of answer this one, but with the team-based approach to calling plays, with the defensive game plan, do you ever recommend, or is it ever like a good call to tweak those plans during a match, or is that something where you just go back to the drawing board at the end of a match or game to say we should have done this? So I guess your take on tweaking the plays during a match.
Yeah, I think in terms of like, certainly it's kind of up to you of how you want to structure those plays, right? Like, and I think, especially as it relates kind of to like the last question, right? You can think of it as like, hey, one play is we're in perimeter, and one play is we're in rotational defense. And kind of going with that analogy, like you can also be in a perimeter defense, but you know, kind of like you saw in that Costa Rica scouting report, hey, we're in a perimeter defense, but we're also going to have a special focus when it's number 19 and block this or block that, or, make sure that we're standing in a certain spot or something like that. So I think in terms of the plays, like I think the plays are you know, those are kind of good foundational pieces to be in, right? Like things that, hey, we're not getting so specific when we're training and it's just ourselves. Like, hey, this is the base play of perimeter defense. This is the base play of rotational defense. And this is where we're going to want to be in general. And then if you're in a match and like, hey, we keep getting beat in area 6 in rotation, then hey, maybe we're still in rotation because we want to pick up that tip, but maybe that middle back defender, instead of rotating all the way to the line, we're maybe just one step to the right as opposed, So, but I think being able to have that foundational piece of like, hey, this is what rotation looks like, and then being able to tweak a little bit, here and there within that play, I guess you can say, I think is what I would recommend.
Great. No, thanks for that insight there. Well, that brings us to me. We've exhausted our question list. So kind of brings me to, as I start to close down the session, for coaches that have joined us live or for those who will be watching the recording, Nate, what's kind of the main takeaway that you would have when it comes to scouting and just communicating defensive game plans?
Yeah, I think for all my time that I've gone to work with different teams and different formats of scouting, I think keeping it simple is probably, the number one takeaway that hopefully that you get from this session. Even for us, right? We have, the game is complex at our level, right? Everybody's good at every position, and we're trying to stop everybody, but that's obviously not totally possible. But can we hone in on what are the specific keys that we want to really achieve over the course of this match, right? And then what is it that you're going to do about it? I think that this format, and I'll pull it up again just really quick. This format of, hey, here's what this team likes to do, and then here's what we're going to do about it. To me, that like, if you can boil scouting down to just that, I think, that simplicity is, what I hope you'll take away from that is, you can have all the information in the world, but what is it that you are actually going to do about it at the end of the day to help your team, give them direction in terms of what they want to do defensively.